Trixie gjorde sin första operation 2010 men är långt ifrån klar än. Hennes förebild är den tecknade seriefiguren Hollywood.
They had the fame, the fortune, the faces the world couldn't stop admiring. But in Hollywood, even perfection has an expiration date. So what happens when celebrities refuse to age and let scalpels, fillers, and impossible beauty standards take the wheel? From frozen smiles to faces no one could recognize, these shocking transformations prove that sometimes the real horror movie starts after the surgery. Buckle up, because vanity doesn't always come with a happy ending. April Michelle Brown, the beauty fix that cost more than anyone could imagine. April. Michelle Brown wasn't chasing Hollywood fame or social media perfection. She simply wanted a cosmetic enhancement that she believed would boost her confidence. Like countless others searching for a bargain, she trusted an underground injector who promised dramatic results without the dramatic price tag. Unfortunately, the only thing injected faster than confidence was danger. It turned out that discount beauty can come with a receipt no one wants to pay. Instead of a successful transformation, industrial-grade silicone entered her body, triggering a devastating infection that spread with terrifying speed. What began as a cosmetic procedure quickly became a desperate fight for survival. April endured an astonishing 27 surgeries as doctors worked to remove damaged tissue and stop the infection from taking even more. In the end, the damage was so severe that she lost both her hands and feet. Suddenly, beauty wasn't about mirrors anymore. It was about making it through another day. It's a heartbreaking reminder that when someone offers luxury results at basement prices, the basement might be the only part that's genuine. Yet April refused to let tragedy become the final chapter of her story. Learning to live with prosthetic limbs, she rebuilt her life with remarkable determination and transformed unimaginable loss into a message that has reached thousands of people. Today, her experience stands as one of the strongest warnings against unregulated cosmetic procedures and unqualified practitioners. Lin May, a beauty secret or a beauty nightmare. Have you ever trusted someone who promised a miracle for almost nothing? Imagine walking in hoping to leave looking years younger, only to discover that the biggest transformation wasn't your confidence. It was the worst decision of your life. That's exactly the kind of shocking twist that turned Mexican entertainer Lin May from a glamorous stage icon into one of the most talked about cautionary tales in cosmetic history. Sometimes if a beauty deal sounds too good to be true, it's probably hiding more surprises than a reality TV finale. Lin May was already famous for her dazzling performances and unforgettable charisma when she decided to refresh her appearance. According to her account, an unqualified practitioner injected her face with baby oil instead of a legitimate cosmetic filler. What was supposed to be a subtle enhancement became a devastating disaster. Her face gradually swelled and changed dramatically, leading to years of corrective procedures that could never fully restore her original features. It was the kind of makeover no one would ever ask for, and proof that cutting corners in cosmetic procedures can end up cutting much deeper than expected. Yet Lin May refused to let that tragedy erase her identity. She continued performing, giving interviews, and facing the public despite relentless attention to her appearance. Her story became far more than a tale about cosmetic surgery. It became a reminder that the real danger isn't growing older, it's trusting the wrong people with your health. In the end, the biggest lesson wasn't about beauty at all. It was about knowing that confidence can be rebuilt, but some shortcuts leave consequences that no filter filler or facelift can ever completely erase. Jo Chuna, the teen who chased a filtered face. What if your high school glow-up came with a surgery bill bigger than most college funds? For Joe Tuna, beauty was never just about makeup, selfies, or good lighting. At only 13, after facing bullying and believing that beauty meant success, she convinced her parents to support her first cosmetic procedure. Most teenagers worry about homework. Jo was already planning her next face upgrade. Within just a few years, her transformation became extreme. Double eyelid surgery, rhinoplasty, jaw contouring, cheek fillers, liposuction. Her face changed again and again, almost like a social media filter being updated in real time. By 17, she had reportedly undergone over 100 procedures with her family, spending more than $620,000. That is not a beauty routine. That is a full-scale renovation project with a face attached. But the price was not only financial. Jo reportedly suffered memory loss, nerve damage, and permanent scarring. Still, she believed the results were worth it. Her story is shocking because it shows how far a young person may go just to feel accepted. In a world where filters sell perfection, Jo Tuna became a living warning. Sometimes the most dangerous beauty standard is the one you start believing before you are even old enough to graduate. Pixie Fox, how far would you go to become a living cartoon? How many surgeries would it take before your reflection no longer looked human, but exactly the way you dreamed in 2050? For Swedish model Pixie Fox, the answer kept climbing until the number shocked the internet. While most people use cartoons as inspiration for Halloween costumes, Pixie wanted to wake up looking like one every single day. It sounds unbelievable, but for her, fantasy wasn't something to watch on TV. It was a blueprint. Determined to resemble an animated character, Pixie underwent dozens of cosmetic procedures, including multiple breast augmentations, facial surgeries, eyelid reshaping, and one of the most controversial decisions of all, having several ribs removed to create an extremely tiny waist. Her dramatic transformation attracted worldwide attention, turning her into a viral sensation. You could say she took hourglass figure a little too literally. But behind the headlines was someone relentlessly chasing a vision that existed only in imagination. Whether people admired her dedication or questioned her choices, Pixie never hid her goal. She openly explained that she wasn't trying to look natural, she was trying to look extraordinary. Her story challenges the line between self-expression and obsession, reminding us that beauty means something different to everyone. But it also raises an unforgettable question: when the pursuit of perfection becomes limitless, do you eventually create your dream or leave the person you once were behind? Carrot Top, the comedian who became the punchline. What happens when the guy famous for outrageous props suddenly becomes the biggest prop in his own show, Carrot Top? Born Scott Thompson was once known for wild red hair, rubber-faced comedy, and jokes that looked like they came from a garage sale with stage lights. But over the years, fans noticed his appearance changing so dramatically that the internet stopped asking about the punchline and started asking, is that still him? His body became more muscular, his face looked smoother, and his features appeared sharper than anyone remembered. Naturally, rumors exploded faster than one of his comedy gadgets. Botox fillers, facelifts, or just intense workouts and very aggressive lighting. Carrot Top has denied going under the knife, even joking that if he had plastic surgery, he would probably look better than this. Honestly, that comeback deserves its own Vegas residency. But whether the transformation came from surgery training or the mysterious magic of show business, Carrot Top never let the jokes knock him down. He kept performing, kept laughing, and kept turning public curiosity into part of the act. His story stands out because it is not just about appearance, it is about surviving the internet's microscope. with a microphone in hand. In the end, Carrot Top may have changed his look, but he never lost the one thing that made people watch: the ability to make himself the joke before anyone else could. Joan Van Ark, the face that time and Hollywood wouldn't leave alone. What if one day people stopped talking about your legendary career and started talking only about your face? Sounds unfair, doesn't it? But in Hollywood, where youth is treated like a lifetime subscription that somehow expires every birthday, that nightmare has become all too familiar. Joan Van Ark spent decades earning applause for her talent, only to find herself making headlines for a completely different reason. As one of television's most recognizable stars, Joan built a career that audiences admired for years. But as she grew older, her appearance began changing dramatically. She was widely believed to have undergone multiple cosmetic procedures, including facelifts and facial fillers, in an effort to preserve her youthful look. Instead of silencing the conversation about aging, the transformations sparked even louder public speculation. Ironically, the more she tried to avoid looking older, the more everyone stopped talking about her performances and started playing detective with old photos. Here's the twist. Hollywood never advertises, the camera remembers everything. Fans didn't forget Joan because she aged. They remembered her because of the unforgettable characters she brought to life. Yet the entertainment industry often acts as if wrinkles are a bigger crime than bad acting. Joan Van Ark's journey reveals the impossible bargain celebrities are offered. Stay forever young, but don't let anyone notice how you did it. That's a game almost nobody wins, and the spotlight rarely shows the cost until it's far too late. Heidi Montag, when one day changed everything. How many cosmetic procedures could someone possibly have in a single day? 2, 3. Now imagine walking into a clinic before sunrise and leaving after 10 different surgeries. Sounds like the plot of a Hollywood satire, right? For reality TV star Heidi Montag. It wasn't fiction, it became one of the most shocking celebrity makeover stories ever told. Sometimes the biggest transformation isn't what the mirror shows, it's what your body has to survive. At the height of her fame, Heidi decided to dramatically reinvent her appearance. In one marathon surgical session, she reportedly underwent 10 cosmetic procedures, including a brow lift, rhinoplasty revision, chin reduction, breast augmentation, revision, liposuction, and several other enhancements. The physical toll was enormous. Recovery proved far more painful than expected, and Heidi later admitted that she underestimated the risks of putting her body through so much at once. Apparently, even the human body has a way of saying, "We're closed for renovations." Years later, Heidi openly reflected on the experience, acknowledging that chasing perfection had come with consequences she never imagined. What makes her story unforgettable isn't simply the number of procedures. It is how quickly the promise of becoming better turned into months of recovery and regret. In an industry obsessed with upgrades, Heidi discovered that there is no fast-forward button for healing. Sometimes the boldest makeover isn't changing your face, it's changing the way you see yourself after the cameras stop rolling. Jocelyn Wildenstein, the million-dollar Catwoman mystery. Would you spend millions of dollars to look less like yourself and more like a luxury jungle cat? For Jocelyn Wildenstein, that question became a headline, a nickname, and a legend all at once. Once known as a glamorous New York socialite, she became world-famous for a face so dramatically altered that tabloids crowned her Catwoman. Subtle, not exactly. But subtle rarely gets a front-page photo. According to the original story, Jocelyn allegedly spent over $4 million on cosmetic procedures, reportedly inspired by a feline look and a husband who loved big cats. Her wide eyes, lifted features, and dramatically reshaped face turned every public appearance into a guessing game. Cheek work, eye lifts, tightening fillers, The rumors stacked up like a surgeon's wish list. Jocelyn, however, insisted her look was natural, even joking that her family simply had cat-like features. That must have been one unforgettable family album. What makes Jocelyn's case so fascinating is not just the transformation, it is the confidence. While the world stared, judged, and memed her into pop culture history, she kept appearing in public like the main character of her own velvet-covered opera. She did not become invisible after changing her face. She became impossible to ignore. In a world terrified of looking ordinary, Jocelyn didn't just chase beauty. She turned herself into the most expensive question mark in cosmetic surgery history. Barbara Eden, the woman who made aging look like a magic trick. What if you reached your 90s and people still stared at your face wondering, okay, seriously, what's the secret? For Barbara Eden, the legendary star of I Dream of Jeannie Growing Older somehow became its own Hollywood mystery. While other celebrities faced endless headlines about dramatic transformations, Eden seemed to glide through the decades looking remarkably youthful. Naturally, the internet reacted like the internet always does. If a woman ages beautifully, there must be a detective assigned to the case. Over the years, speculation surrounded whether Barbara underwent cosmetic procedures to maintain her appearance. Some observers have pointed to possible facelifts, Botox, or other subtle enhancements, but Eden herself has never publicly confirmed major plastic surgery. Unlike the dramatic transformations elsewhere on this list, her face remained recognizable, the same bright smile, familiar features, and unmistakable screen presence audiences remembered. If there was a genie granting beauty wishes, apparently, she kept the lamp very well hidden. And perhaps that is exactly why Barbara's place on this list feels different. There is no shocking confession, no catastrophic procedure, no face the public suddenly failed to recognize, only decades of speculation surrounding a woman who refused to explain every wrinkle she did or didn't have. Hollywood wanted a secret formula. Barbara gave them a smile. Sometimes the greatest trick isn't turning back time. It's leaving everyone guessing whether you ever needed to. Jordan James Park, the man who tried to out-Kardashian a Kardashian. How far would you go to look like your favorite celebrity? A haircut, a contour palette, maybe a dramatic selfie angle. For Jordan James Park, that was amateur hour. The British makeup artist reportedly spent over $170,000 on cosmetic procedures in pursuit of a hyper-glam look, inspired by Kim Kardashian. Most fans buy merch. Jordan basically bought a new face with express shipping. His transformation included nose jobs, a chin implant, eyelid surgery, liposuction, lip lifts, Botox, and enough lip filler to make a selfie camera panic. His exaggerated features turned him into a viral figure, pulling in fascination, criticism, and plenty of online. Even when doctors warned him to slow down, Jordan leaned into the attention. To him, this was not damage control, it was branding. What makes Jordan's case so unforgettable is his total commitment to the image. He did not stumble into becoming a headline. He posed for it. In an age where faces are filtered, edited, and upgraded like phone apps, Jordan simply took the trend off-screen and made it permanent. Whether people call it fabulous or frightening, his look did exactly what he wanted. Nobody scrolled past. Katie Price, when is enough actually enough? How many surgeries does it take before just one more little tweak becomes a full-time lifestyle? Ask Katie Price, although you might need a calculator. The British media personality has spent decades transforming her appearance through breast augmentations, facelifts, rhinoplasty, liposuction fillers, and other cosmetic procedures. While most people change their hairstyle when they want a fresh start, Katie has occasionally treated the operating room like a beauty salon with anesthesia. Her journey began with breast surgery in the late 1990s, but it certainly did not stop there. Over the years, Katie reportedly underwent numerous breast operations, sometimes increasing her size, sometimes reducing it alongside repeated facial procedures. She has openly discussed painful recoveries, complications, and moments of regret. Yet somehow the temptation to make another change kept calling. It is almost as if her mirror had a subscription service, new update, available, restart now. But Katie has never been shy about owning her choices. Critics talked tabloids, counted procedures, and the public watched every transformation like a never-ending season finale. Yet she kept returning to the spotlight on her own terms. Perhaps the strangest part of her story is not how many times she changed her body, but how cosmetic surgery itself became part of her public identity. For Katie Price, reinvention was never a chapter. It became the entire series, and apparently nobody has found the cancel button yet. Cardi B, the rap queen who said, "Don't do what I did." Would you trust a basement beauty deal with your body? Cardi B did. And years later, she made sure the world heard exactly why that was a terrible idea. Before the fame, the awards, and the designer outfits, Cardi got illegal butt injections for just $800. That is cheaper than some concert tickets, which is already a red flag with a siren attached. According to the original story, the procedure was done outside a proper medical setting, using biopolymer injections that were never supposed to become part of a beauty routine. Cardi later spoke openly about the pain, the danger, and the reality of having those substances removed from her body in 2022. The glow-up fantasy had turned into a cleanup mission, and not the glamorous kind, with champagne and soft lighting. What makes Cardi's story hit differently is her honesty. She did not pretend everything was perfect or hide behind celebrity silence. She warned fans not to chase shortcuts, especially when the clinic sounds more like a bad decision with furniture. Cardi B may still support people choosing cosmetic work safely, but her message was loud, blunt, and very Cardi: upgrade yourself if you want, but don't let a bargain syringe write your medical history. Neven Ciganovic, the nose job with a 4-month surprise. But what is the worst thing you could imagine waking up with after a routine nose job? Swelling, bruising, a nose that suddenly looks like it belongs to someone else. For Croatian stylist and reality personality Neven Ciganovic, the answer was far more bizarre and painfully persistent. After undergoing rhinoplasty in Iran, he developed an unexpected medical complication that lasted for months. Suddenly fixing his nose had created a problem nowhere near his nose. Neven reportedly developed priapism, a prolonged and painful erection, after reacting to anesthesia used during the procedure. The condition continued for roughly 3 months and eventually required several additional operations to treat. While the situation sounds like the setup to a comedy, nobody would dare pitch for Neven. It was a serious medical ordeal involving pain recovery and repeated hospital visits. Talk about going in for a smaller nose and leaving with the world's most awkward bonus feature. And yet perhaps the strangest detail is that this nightmare did not completely end Neven's interest in cosmetic enhancement. His transformation had already included multiple procedures, and one extraordinary complication simply became another chapter in his very public journey. Most people leave rhinoplasty with an ice pack and a new profile. Neven left with a medical story so unbelievable that even Hollywood writers might be told, "Tone it down, no one will believe this." Simon Cowell, the judge who gave his own face a red X. What happens when the man famous for judging everyone else suddenly becomes the audition? Simon Cowell built an empire on sharp suits, sharper comments, and facial expressions that could end a singing career in 3 seconds. But in recent years, fans stopped focusing on his one-liners and started asking a very different question. Wait, what happened to Simon? His face appeared smoother, tighter, and noticeably different, sparking endless speculation about fillers and cosmetic treatments. Unlike many celebrities who deny the obvious while standing under studio lights, Simon eventually admitted he had gone too far. The real wake-up call reportedly came when his son reacted badly to his appearance. Nothing says time to rethink the filler quite like your own child looking at you as if the family TV judge has been replaced by a wax figure with Wi-Fi. To his credit, Simon pulled back. He said he had the filler removed and shifted toward a healthier lifestyle instead of chasing every anti-aging trick in the Hollywood catalog. The irony is delicious. After years of giving contestants brutal feedback, Simon finally faced the harshest panel of all: his mirror, his son, and the internet. And for once, the verdict was clear: less cosmetic drama, more actual face. Rachel Napier, the beauty party that nearly cost her a lip. Would you let someone inject filler into your face at a friend's house? Maybe after a glass of wine, some music, and the comforting promise that everyone's doing it. For Rachel Napier, what sounded like a casual beauty party quickly turned into a medical emergency. She wanted fuller lips, not a starring role in the most terrifying episode of Girls' Night Gone Wrong. After receiving lip filler at a Botox party, Rachel woke up in severe pain with her upper lip dramatically swollen. The filler had reportedly entered an artery, restricting blood flow and putting the tissue at risk. Doctors warned that without urgent treatment, she could lose part of her lip. Thankfully, specialists were able to dissolve the filler and save it. Suddenly, the question was no longer, do my lips look bigger, but will I still have one tomorrow? Rachel later turned that frightening experience into action, publicly campaigning for stronger regulation of cosmetic injectables in the UK. And perhaps that is the sharpest twist of all. She walked into a party, expecting a beauty upgrade, and walked out with a political mission.
My name is Tara Jane, and everything on me is tiny except for my tatas.
Hollywood has always sold the dream of eternal beauty, where flawless faces become legends, and aging feels like the ultimate enemy. But behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, some of the biggest stars chased youth so relentlessly that they ended up transforming themselves beyond recognition. What began as tiny cosmetic touch-ups soon turned into shocking makeovers that left fans speechless. Were they chasing perfection or trapped in an impossible obsession? Stay with us as we reveal the most dramatic celebrity plastic surgery, transformations stories that prove the scariest Hollywood makeover isn't created by makeup or special effects, but by reality itself. Farrah Abraham, the reality star who grew up on camera and in fillers. What happens when your teenage years, your motherhood, and your makeovers all unfold under America's brightest spotlight? Farrah Abraham first became known through reality TV. But over time, the conversation shifted from her life story to her changing face. Viewers watched her grow up on screen, and then watched the upgrades arrive like software updates with lip gloss. Farrah has openly admitted to several cosmetic procedures, including breast implants, a nose job, a chin implant, lip injections, Botox, and other enhancements. Her look became sharper, fuller, and far more dramatic, sparking constant online reactions. Every selfie seemed to launch a new comment section trial, with fans asking whether she had gone too far. Reality TV gave her fame, but cosmetic work gave the internet a never-ending group project. What makes Farah's transformation so fascinating is that it happened in public, one procedure and one headline at a time. She did not quietly change off-screen. She evolved while cameras, tabloids, and followers kept score. In a culture where filters are normal and perfection is profitable, Farah simply turned the dial higher. Whether admired, criticized, or endlessly debated, she became proof that growing up famous can mean never getting to grow up privately. Carol Bryan, the filler injection that stole her face. What if one tiny injection could change your face so dramatically that even your own reflection became a stranger? Carol Bryan wasn't chasing a wild transformation or trying to become a human Barbie. She simply wanted to soften a few signs of aging. A little filler, a little refresh, what could possibly go wrong? Unfortunately, in Carol's case, the answer was almost everything. After receiving permanent facial fillers, Carol developed severe complications that caused dramatic swelling and disfigurement around her forehead and eyes. Her appearance changed so drastically that she withdrew from public life, hiding from mirrors and even from people she loved. Multiple corrective surgeries followed as specialists worked to reconstruct her face and restore what had been lost. This was no glamorous Hollywood makeover montage. There was no upbeat soundtrack, just years of pain, isolation, and an exhausting fight to recognize herself again. But Carol eventually stepped back into the light, not because every scar disappeared, but because she refused to remain hidden. She began sharing her experience publicly and advocating for greater awareness of cosmetic procedure risks. The woman who once avoided cameras ultimately stood in front of them by choice. And that may be the most unexpected transformation of all. The filler changed her face, but surviving it changed her voice, and this time people were listening. Hang Myoku, the singer who turned cooking oil into a nightmare. Would you ever inject something into your own face if no doctor would touch it? For Hang Myoku, the answer became a tragedy that shocked South Korea. Once a singer and model with delicate features and stage-ready beauty, she became obsessed with staying young. When medical professionals finally refused to give her more procedures, she did not stop. She simply found a darker shortcut. After receiving silicone injections, Hang was reportedly given syringes and materials to continue the process herself. When the silicone ran out, desperation took over, and she turned to cooking oil. Yes, the same kind that belongs in a frying pan, not under human skin. Her face swelled dramatically, becoming so distorted that even her own parents struggled to recognize her. At that point, this was no longer beauty maintenance. It was a horror story with a receipt from the kitchen aisle. Doctors later removed some of the foreign material, but the damage could never be fully undone. Hang eventually stepped away from fame and lived a quieter life, carrying the visible consequences of an obsession that had gone far beyond vanity. Her reflection became a permanent headline, but also a brutal question when the world convinces you that beauty is everything. What happens when you start treating your own face like an experiment? Tara Jane McConaughey, how much filler is too much filler? What if your beauty goal was not to look natural, but to look so extreme that nobody could possibly scroll past you? For Australian cosmetic nurse Tara Jane, subtlety apparently packed its bags and left the building years ago. With dramatically enlarged lips, enhanced breasts, a tiny waist, and doll-like features, she turned herself into a walking headline. And yes, when even airport security might wonder whether your lips count as extra baggage, you know the transformation has gone far beyond a simple touch-up. Tara reportedly spent tens of thousands of dollars on cosmetic procedures, including multiple breast augmentations, rhinoplasty, Botox, and extensive lip and facial fillers. Her exaggerated appearance earned her worldwide attention, and even a spot on Botched, where doctors reportedly refused to perform further surgery because of concerns about her extremely low body weight. Most patients fear hearing no from a surgeon. Tara seemed more likely to hear it as try another clinic. But Tara never pretended she wanted to blend in. She openly embraced her extreme image and continued chasing a version of beauty entirely her own. Critics stared, social media exploded, and doctors raised eyebrows, possibly the only eyebrows in the room, without Botox. Yet Tara remained unapologetic. She was not trying to win everyone's approval. She was building a face impossible to forget. And in the attention economy, whether people love the look or hate it, one thing is certain, they definitely looked. Mickey Rourke, the boxer who tried to rebuild a broken face. What happens when Hollywood's smoldering bad boy trades movie sets for boxing rings and his face pays the bill? Mickey Rourke was once the kind of leading man cameras loved, rugged, magnetic, and dangerous in all the right ways. Then came boxing. Broken noses, damaged cheekbones, and enough punishment to make a stunt coordinator sweat. He didn't go under the knife chasing youth. He went in hoping to repair the damage. But repairs can go terribly wrong when the wrong hands are holding the tools. Mickey later admitted he chose the wrong doctor for his facial reconstruction, and the results changed his appearance dramatically. After multiple nose surgeries and cheekbone work, the man Hollywood remembered looked noticeably different. The internet, being the internet, reacted with the compassion of a blender full of knives. Still, Mickey's story has a rough kind of honesty. This was not a vanity fairy tale with champagne and selfies. It was a man trying to put himself back together after getting hit for real. His face may have changed, but the grit stayed. In a town obsessed with flawless surfaces, Mickey Rourke became something much rarer, visibly damaged, openly imperfect, and somehow still impossible to ignore. Donatella Versace. When fashion's golden queen became the ultimate makeover mystery. What happens when the woman defining beauty for the entire fashion world suddenly becomes the biggest beauty mystery herself? Donatella Versace spent decades surrounded by supermodels, flashing cameras, and impossible standards. But as the years passed, fans noticed something else evolving alongside the legendary fashion empire, her face. And naturally, the internet became a courtroom where everyone had an opinion, but nobody had a medical degree. Donatella has openly acknowledged using Botox, but speculation has long surrounded possible fillers, facial procedures, and other cosmetic enhancements. Her dramatically fuller lips, smoother skin, and changing features became almost as recognizable as the Versace name itself. Critics called it excessive. Fans called it iconic. Either way, subtlety clearly missed the invitation to this fashion show. Yet despite endless headlines about her appearance, Donatella kept walking into every room like she owned the building, and quite often she probably did. Then came the surprise nobody expected. More recent public appearances sparked headlines claiming Donatella suddenly looked fresher and dramatically different again. Was it surgery, makeup, lighting, or simply the most powerful glam squad money can buy? She never handed the public a neat answer. Perhaps that is perfectly fitting. Donatella built a career selling mystery, glamour, and spectacle, and somehow her own face became fashion's longest-running cliffhanger. Raji Narinasinghe, the filler nightmare that came from the underground. Would you let someone inject your face if the ingredients sounded more like a hardware store receipt than a beauty treatment? Raji Narinasinghe simply wanted to feel more confident in her appearance. But in the early 2000s, safe cosmetic access was not always easy, especially for transgender women seeking affordable procedures. That vulnerability led her to the wrong person with the wrong syringe. Raji was injected by an underground practitioner known as the Duchess, who used a dangerous mixture that reportedly included substances like cement mineral oil and tire sealant. Instead of soft beauty, her face became swollen, hardened, and painful. It was not a makeover, it was a construction project gone medically off-script. When your filler sounds like it belongs in a garage, the red flags are no longer flags, they are fireworks. But Raji did something powerful. She stopped hiding. She shared her experience publicly, appeared on television, and underwent corrective treatment to remove some of the damaging material. Her face could not fully return to what it was, but her voice grew stronger than the shame surrounding it. Raji turned a private disaster into a public reckoning, proving that the ugliest part of the story was never her appearance. It was the system that made unsafe beauty feel like the only option. Pete Burns' the lip injection that nearly destroyed everything. What if one cosmetic procedure went so wrong that you spent years and nearly your entire fortune trying to fix it? Pete Burns, the flamboyant frontman of Dead or Alive, was never interested in looking ordinary. With his dramatic style, fearless personality, and unforgettable appearance, he treated transformation like an art form. But one procedure turned that artistic obsession into a medical nightmare no stage costume could hide. After receiving lip injections, Pete suffered severe complications when the filler reportedly migrated through his face, causing swelling, distortion, and painful health problems. What followed was not one simple correction, but years of reconstructive procedures, reportedly around 200 operations to repair the damage. At one point, he feared losing his lips entirely. Imagine going in for a little extra volume and leaving with enough medical appointments to qualify for a hospital loyalty program. Yet Pete never apologized for wanting to change his appearance. He famously rejected conventional ideas about gender and beauty, viewing his face as something he could continually redesign. That is what makes his story so complicated. The tragedy was not that he dared to look different, but that one disastrous procedure turned personal freedom into years of physical suffering. Pete wanted his face to be a canvas. Unfortunately, one bad injection turned part of that canvas into a battlefield. Dennis Avner, the man who tried to become a tiger. Have you ever loved an animal so much that you thought, maybe I should just become one? For most people, that means buying a hoodie with ears. For Dennis Avner, better known as Stalking Cat, it meant turning his entire body into a living feline project. A former Navy veteran and computer technician, Dennis believed his spiritual identity was connected to the tiger, and he decided subtle symbolism was simply not dramatic enough. His transformation included extensive facial tattoos, subdermal implants, reshaped ears, a modified nose whisker, implants, a split upper lip, and even a mechanical tail. Yes, a tail. Because apparently once you pass whiskers, the accessory department opens permanently. These extreme body modifications earned him international attention and a Guinness World Record for the most permanent transformations to look like an animal. But Dennis was never just chasing shock value. To him, this was identity, spirituality, and self-expression pushed to the absolute edge. The world saw a strange headline. He saw a truer version of himself. Whether viewers found it fascinating, confusing, or straight out of a sci-fi documentary, Dennis Avner did what few people dare to do. He stopped trying to fit into the human crowd and walked through life as his own wild creation. Jessica Alves, when becoming a human doll was only the beginning. What if you spent years and a fortune transforming yourself into the perfect man only to realize you were never meant to be that man at all? Jessica Alves, formerly known publicly as Rodrigo Alves, first shocked the world through her extreme pursuit of a human Ken doll appearance. Dozens of procedures, endless headlines, and a face redesigned more often than some people update their phones, Yet the biggest transformation was still waiting. Over the years, Jessica reportedly underwent more than 100 cosmetic procedures, including multiple nose jobs, facelifts, liposuction implants, and countless enhancements. Some operations brought dangerous complications, including serious problems with her nose. But in 2020, she publicly came out as a transgender woman and began another chapter of physical transformation to align her appearance with her identity. Apparently, becoming a human Ken doll was only the opening act. Today, Jessica embraces a glamorous, hyper-feminine image and continues to attract worldwide attention. Her journey is messy, controversial, expensive, and impossible to ignore, but reducing it to surgery alone misses the real twist. After years of sculpting herself into someone the world could label, she finally chose the identity that felt like her own. The doll changed, the headlines changed, and the name changed too. But this time, Jessica was the one writing the label. Anastasia Pokreschuk, the woman with the world's most famous cheeks. How much filler does it take before your cheekbones enter the room 5 minutes before you do? For Ukrainian model Anastasia Pokreschuk, subtle beauty was never the goal. Once almost unrecognizable compared with her younger self, she transformed her face with enormous cheek fillers, dramatically enlarged lips, Botox, and other cosmetic enhancements. The result? A look so extreme that millions stopped scrolling just to ask one question. Wait, are those cheeks actually real? Anastasia reportedly began experimenting with fillers in her 20s and quickly became obsessed with making her cheeks bigger. Despite endless criticism online, she openly declared that she loved her appearance and had no intention of shrinking anything. In fact, the bigger her cheeks became, the more confident she claimed to feel. While critics begged her to stop, Anastasia essentially responded by reaching for another syringe. Subtlety knocked on the door, took one look, and quietly went home. But here is what makes Anastasia different from many others. On this list, she does not appear embarrassed, regretful, or desperate to reverse her transformation. She proudly owns the face she created, even when the internet treats it like public property. Her cheeks became her signature, her controversy, and arguably her career. You may love the look, hate it, or stare at it in complete confusion, but Anastasia already won the attention game. And judging by those cheekbones, she came prepared to take up plenty of space. Priscilla Presley, the fake doctor who left a permanent mark. Would you let a charming doctor inject something into your face if celebrities were lining up for the same treatment Priscilla Presley did? And the truth behind that syringe was far more disturbing than anyone expected. The former wife of Elvis Presley reportedly became one of several victims of an unlicensed practitioner who promised a miracle anti-aging treatment. Unfortunately, what entered her face was not some luxurious Hollywood secret. It was industrial-grade silicone. The man behind the injections, Daniel Serrano, falsely presented himself as a qualified doctor and treated several high-profile clients. Priscilla later confirmed that she had unknowingly received injections from him, leaving her with lasting facial complications. The treatment that promised youth instead changed her appearance and required corrective care. Apparently in Hollywood, even a beauty appointment can come with a plot twist worthy of a crime drama. Yet Priscilla never allowed one disastrous decision to erase decades of public life. She continued appearing at major events supporting Elvis's legacy and facing cameras that examined every detail of her appearance. The cruelest irony. She trusted someone promising to preserve her face only to discover that he had lied about nearly everything. Priscilla walked in expecting a beauty treatment and walked out carrying evidence of a deception that no amount of celebrity status could protect her from. Laura Avila, the beauty trip that ended in tragedy. Would you cross the border for a cheaper cosmetic procedure if it promised the perfect look before your wedding. Laura Avila did, and what followed was a nightmare no bride, fiancé, or family could ever imagine. In 2018, the 36-year-old Texas woman traveled to Mexico for rhinoplasty and breast implant replacement, hoping to return home with renewed confidence. Instead, a routine beauty appointment became a desperate fight for her life. Shortly after anesthesia was administered, something went catastrophically wrong. Laura suffered cardiac arrest and severe brain swelling, leaving her in critical condition. Her family claimed the anesthesia had been improperly administered, while precious hours passed before she was transferred for emergency care. She had entered the clinic dreaming about wedding photos. Suddenly, her loved ones were gathered around a hospital bed. Talk about a makeover plan receiving the darkest possible rewrite. Laura was eventually placed on life support, and her family faced the devastating decision to let her go. Her fiancé had been preparing to stand beside her at the altar, but instead found himself mourning the future they would never share. Laura's story remains haunting, not because she wanted to change her appearance, but because something so ordinary, a hope to feel more beautiful, ended with consequences no one saw coming. One trip, one procedure, and an entire future disappeared. Yulia Tarasevich, the beauty queen who woke up unable to smile. What if you walked into a clinic hoping for a fresher face and walked out unable to smile or even close your eyes properly? That nightmare became reality for Russian beauty queen Yulia Tarasevich, who reportedly underwent a facelift, eyelid surgery, and other cosmetic procedures. She expected a glamorous upgrade. Instead, her reflection delivered the kind of plot twist nobody wants, especially when the price tag was thousands of dollars. After the surgery, Yulia suffered serious complications that dramatically affected her facial movement. She claimed she could no longer close her eyes normally or smile as before, leaving her appearance almost frozen. Corrective treatments followed, but the damage reportedly proved difficult to reverse. Imagine paying for rejuvenation and discovering that your facial expressions have apparently gone on permanent vacation without leaving a forwarding address. Yulia later took legal action against the surgeons, while the doctors reportedly disputed responsibility for her condition. The case turned a private cosmetic decision into an international headline, with before and after images fueling endless public debate. But behind the sensational photos was a woman fighting to regain something most people never think twice about: the simple ability to smile naturally. She entered the clinic as a beauty queen seeking perfection. She left facing a battle no crown could hide. Linda Evangelista, the supermodel who said a beauty treatment left her brutally disfigured. What happens when one of the world's most famous supermodels walks into a cosmetic clinic hoping for a subtle improvement and ends up hiding from the world for years? Linda Evangelista once ruled the fashion industry, famously declaring she wouldn't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day. But after undergoing cool sculpting treatments, the woman who had faced countless cameras suddenly wanted nothing to do with them. Instead of reducing fat as expected, Linda developed a rare complication called paradoxical adipose hyperplasia, which caused treated areas to grow larger and harden. She said the condition left her permanently disfigured and deeply affected her confidence. The cruel irony was impossible to miss. A procedure marketed as a way to freeze fat apparently gave it a promotion. Multiple treatments and corrective surgeries followed, but Linda said the results remained. For years, she stayed largely out of public view before finally revealing what had happened. Then came her return, a powerful step back in front of the cameras after years of silence. It was about a woman whose legendary image became the very thing she struggled to face. The fashion world once knew every angle of Linda Evangelista. Suddenly, she was fighting to reclaim the courage to be seen at all.
Way of serving a drink. Okay, once again, let's see the bunny dip done just so. That's absolutely correct.
They were the women everyone wanted to be and everyone wanted to know. Their faces graced magazine covers, their beauty captivated millions, and their lives seemed like the ultimate Hollywood fantasy. But behind the glamour, the flashing cameras, and the endless attention lurked a far darker reality. Murders, mysterious overdoses, devastating crashes, and secrets that followed them to the grave. What really happened to some of Playboy's most famous playmates tonight? We're uncovering the shocking true stories of the women who had it all yet never lived to see their 50th birthday. Anna Nicole Smith, the Playboy dream that ended in heartbreak. Few women embodied the promise of the American dream quite like Anna Nicole Smith. Born in a small Texas town with little money and even fewer opportunities, she dreamed of a life far beyond her humble beginnings. That dream seemed to come true almost overnight when her stunning looks landed her on the pages of Playboy, eventually earning her the title of Playmate of the Year. But as fame arrived, so did a level of attention that would transform her life forever. Then came the relationship that shocked the world. Anna's marriage to billionaire oil tycoon J. Howard Marshall ignited endless headlines, fierce public debate, and intense media scrutiny. Was it true love, financial ambition, or something far more complicated? As cameras followed her every move, Anna became one of the most talked about women in America, with every decision dissected by tabloids and television audiences alike. Behind the glamorous image, however, a different story was unfolding. The legal battles over Marshall's fortune stretched on for years, keeping her trapped in a whirlwind of controversy. At the same time, personal struggles and devastating family tragedies began to take an emotional toll. The woman who once seemed larger than life increasingly appeared weighed down by pressures few could truly understand. Then in February 2007, the world woke up to shocking news. Anna Nicole Smith had passed away at just 39 years old. Her death sparked renewed questions, endless speculation, and a media frenzy that continued long after she was gone. Nearly 2 decades later, her story remains one of Hollywood's most fascinating and tragic tales, a cautionary journey through fame, fortune, heartbreak, and the hidden cost of living under the spotlight. Eve Meyer, the Playboy star lost in aviation's darkest disaster. Eve Meyer had already lived several extraordinary lives before fate dealt her final hand. Rising to fame as Playboy's Miss June 1955, she was far more than a glamorous model. Ambitious, intelligent, and determined, Eve reinvented herself as a successful film producer, helping build a career that extended far beyond the spotlight. By the late 1970s, she seemed to have everything: success, recognition, and a future full of possibilities. But on March 27, 1977, an ordinary flight turned into one of the most shocking tragedies in aviation history. Thousands of feet above the Atlantic, no one aboard Pan Am Flight 1736 could have imagined they were heading toward a disaster that would forever change air travel. Delays, unexpected diversions, and worsening weather conditions created a chain of events no passenger could see unfolding. As thick fog engulfed Tenerife's Los Rodeos airport in the Canary Islands, confusion began to spread on the ground. Communication errors and limited visibility created a deadly situation. Then, in a matter of seconds, two fully loaded Boeing 747 jumbo jets collided on the runway in a catastrophic crash that sent shockwaves around the world. The scale of the disaster was almost unimaginable. Among the 583 lives lost was Eve Meyer, just 48 years old. Her sudden death transformed her story from one of reinvention and success into a heartbreaking chapter of aviation history. Yet her legacy endures not only through her work in entertainment, but also through the safety reforms that emerged from the tragedy. Decades later, the disaster remains a chilling reminder of how quickly a routine journey can become a moment remembered forever. Star Stowe, the Playboy mystery that was never solved. When Star Stowe appeared as Playboy's Playmate of the Month in February 1977, she stood out from the crowd. With her rebellious spirit, striking looks, and unconventional personality, she seemed determined to live life on her own terms. Unlike many women chasing Hollywood fame, Star cultivated an image that was bold, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. But as the spotlight faded, her life began taking a far different path than anyone could have imagined. The years following her Playboy success were marked by personal struggles and increasing instability. Friends described a woman searching for purpose while navigating difficult circumstances. The glamorous world that once embraced her gradually disappeared, leaving behind challenges that few outsiders ever saw. As time passed, Star drifted further from the life that had first brought her fame. Then came a shocking discovery. On March 16, 1997, Star Stowe was found dead behind a business in Coral Springs, Florida. Investigators immediately launched a search for answers, but the circumstances surrounding her death raised more questions than they resolved. Rumors circulated, theories emerged, and public curiosity intensified as details slowly surfaced. Authorities explored multiple leads, including the possibility that her case was connected to a serial offender operating in the region at the time. Yet despite years of investigation, no one was ever brought to justice. The case remains officially unsolved, frozen in a cloud of unanswered questions. Nearly 3 decades later, Star Stowe's story continues to intrigue true crime followers, not because of how it ended, but because no one has ever been able to fully explain what happened in those final moments. Marilyn Monroe, the woman behind the world's most famous smile. Few names in Hollywood history carry the same power as Marilyn Monroe. With platinum blonde hair, dazzling charm, and an unforgettable screen presence, she became the ultimate symbol of glamour. But behind the iconic photographs and blockbuster films was Norma Jean Mortensen, a woman who grew up in foster homes and spent much of her life searching for stability, acceptance, and love. The world saw a superstar. Few ever saw the person beneath the legend. As her fame exploded, so did public fascination with every aspect of her life. Hit films turned her into an international sensation, while high-profile romances and marriages kept her constantly in the headlines. Yet the brighter her star shined, the more intense the pressure became. Surrounded by cameras, expectations, and endless scrutiny, Marilyn found herself trapped between the image the world demanded and the reality she lived every day. By the early 1960s, speculation followed her everywhere. Stories involving powerful figures, private struggles, and unanswered questions fueled endless curiosity. Friends and colleagues noticed increasing signs of emotional exhaustion as she attempted to balance an overwhelming career with deeply personal challenges. The contrast between her public confidence and private vulnerability only deepened the mystery surrounding her life. Then, on August 5, 1962, shocking news spread across the globe. Marilyn Monroe was found dead at her Los Angeles home at just 36 years old. The circumstances sparked worldwide attention and countless debates that continue to this day. Yet beyond the headlines lies something even more compelling: the story of a woman who transformed herself from a forgotten child into one of the most recognizable faces ever captured by a camera, leaving behind an image that remains impossible to forget. Jane Mansfield, Hollywood's blonde bombshell with a shocking final chapter. To the public, Jane Mansfield was the ultimate blonde bombshell, a glamorous Hollywood star whose beauty demanded attention wherever she went. But behind the headlines was a woman who constantly defied expectations. With an exceptionally high IQ fluency in multiple languages and a sharp understanding of publicity, Jane carefully crafted an image that made her one of the most recognizable celebrities of the 1950s and 1960s. She wasn't just playing a role. She was mastering the art of fame itself. Her career exploded with hit films, television appearances, and endless media coverage. Every appearance seemed larger than life, helping her become one of the era's most talked-about stars. Yet as Hollywood evolved, maintaining that level of fame became increasingly difficult. New faces emerged, public tastes changed, and the spotlight that once followed her everywhere slowly began to shift. Then came the night that would forever become part of entertainment history. In the early hours of June 29, 1967, after a nightclub engagement in Mississippi, Jane was traveling toward New Orleans with several passengers, including 3 of her children. What began as a routine road trip suddenly turned into a devastating tragedy on a dark highway. Within moments, everything changed. The accident instantly generated headlines across the world and fueled rumors that would persist for years. While many sensational stories emerged afterward, the reality was tragic enough on its own. Jane Mansfield was only 34 years old when her remarkable journey came to an abrupt end. Yet even today, her name continues to spark fascination, not simply because of how her story ended, but because of the extraordinary life she lived before that final drive into history. Ashley Mattingly, a beautiful life hidden behind silent battles. When Ashley Mattingly appeared as Playboy's Miss March 2011, she seemed to embody confidence, beauty, and the glamorous lifestyle many dreamed of. With her striking looks and growing popularity, she quickly gained attention in the modeling world. To outsiders, Ashley appeared to be living the kind of life most people only see in magazines. But as is often the case behind fame, there was far more to her story than what appeared on the surface. Away from the cameras, Ashley faced challenges that rarely made headlines. Friends and family later revealed that she struggled with personal difficulties for years, including issues related to mental health and substance abuse. While fans saw polished photos and public appearances, those closest to her understood that she was fighting battles that couldn't be captured in a photograph. Then came 2020, a year that changed the world. As the COVID-19 pandemic spread across the globe, millions of people found themselves isolated from friends, family, and support systems. During this difficult period, concerns grew about the emotional toll the crisis was taking on vulnerable individuals. On April 16, 2020, shocking news emerged that Ashley Mattingly had passed away at the age of just 33, leaving many stunned and searching for answers. Her story became more than a headline. It became a reminder of how invisible personal struggles can be. Behind every glamorous image may be challenges that few people ever witness. Through their grief, Ashley's family chose to speak openly about mental health awareness, hoping that others facing similar hardships would feel encouraged to seek support before reaching a breaking point. Elisa Bridges, the Playboy beauty, whose story ended too soon. When Elisa Bridges appeared as Playboy's Miss December 1994, she quickly captured attention with her natural beauty, warm smile, and effortless all-American charm. Unlike many celebrities who seemed larger than life, Elisa projected an image that felt approachable and genuine. Her popularity grew rapidly, earning her a devoted following and a place among the memorable faces of the Playboy era. To many fans, her future appeared bright and full of promise. Yet beyond the glamorous photos and public appearances, much of Elisa's personal life remained private. While she continued to enjoy recognition from her modeling success, those closest to her knew that life outside the spotlight was often far more complicated than the public imagined. Like many individuals navigating fame, she faced challenges that were rarely visible to those watching from afar. Then, on February 7, 2002, a shocking discovery sent waves through the entertainment world. Elisa was found unresponsive at a friend's home in Los Angeles. The news stunned fans who remembered her as a vibrant young woman with so much life ahead of her. Questions quickly emerged as people struggled to understand how someone so young could be gone so suddenly. Investigators later determined that her death resulted from acute intoxication involving prescription medications, and no foul play was suspected. She was only 28 years old. The sudden loss served as a sobering reminder that even lives that appear glamorous on the surface can contain struggles hidden from public view. Elisa's story remains one of the most heartbreaking chapters among Playboy's former stars, a life filled with potential interrupted far too early. Judy Tyler, the rising star whose journey ended in an instant. In the summer of 1957, Judy Tyler seemed destined for Hollywood greatness. Young, talented, and full of promise, she had just landed the role of a lifetime opposite Elvis Presley in Jailhouse Rock. Audiences immediately noticed her charm and screen presence, and industry insiders believed she was on the verge of becoming one of Hollywood's next major stars. At only 24 years old, the future appeared limitless. As filming wrapped, excitement surrounding the movie continued to build. For Judy, it should have been the beginning of a remarkable new chapter. Opportunities were opening, her profile was rising, and she finally seemed ready to step into the spotlight on a much larger stage. Everything she had worked for was suddenly within reach. Then, without warning, tragedy struck. On July 3, 1957, just days after production had concluded, Judy and her husband were traveling through Wyoming when they became involved in a devastating automobile accident near Rock River. The shocking news spread quickly through Hollywood, leaving friends, colleagues, and fans struggling to comprehend how such a bright future could disappear so suddenly. The loss hit especially hard because so many believed Judy's best years were still ahead of her. Elvis Presley was reportedly deeply affected by the tragedy and found it difficult to revisit the film they had made together. When Jailhouse Rock was eventually released, audiences saw a talented young actress whose career had been cut short before it truly began. Her story remains one of Hollywood's most poignant what-if moments, a glimpse of a star who never got the chance to see how brightly she could shine. Dorothy Stratton, the Playboy star, caught in a real-life nightmare. At just 20 years old, Dorothy Stratton seemed to have the world at her feet. Discovered while working at a Dairy Queen in Vancouver, the stunning blonde quickly rose from small-town obscurity to become one of Playboy's brightest stars. Crowned Playmate of the Year. In 1980, she wasn't just a model. Hollywood executives saw her as the next major sensation. Movie roles were arriving, influential figures were taking notice, and a dazzling future appeared all but guaranteed. But behind the glamorous photographs and growing fame, a storm was quietly building. Dorothy's relationship with her husband and manager, Paul Snider, had become increasingly strained. As her career soared, she began seeking independence and planning a new chapter of her life. To outsiders, it looked like the natural evolution of a young woman discovering her own voice. Yet not everyone was prepared to let her go. What happened next stunned Hollywood. In August 1980, Dorothy agreed to meet Snider to discuss matters related to their separation. Instead, the meeting became the center of a tragedy that would dominate headlines across America. The shocking circumstances surrounding her death left friends, colleagues, and fans struggling to understand how a rising star's promising future could vanish in a single afternoon. The case immediately became one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking stories. Dorothy Stratton had everything people dream about: beauty, fame, opportunity, and a career on the verge of exploding. Yet her life ended before she had the chance to realize her full potential. More than 4 decades later, her story continues to fascinate not because of celebrity gossip, but because it remains a chilling reminder of how quickly success and tragedy can collide behind the curtain of fame. Tiffany Sloan, the Playboy beauty whose life took a dark turn. When Tiffany Sloan appeared as Playboy's Playmate of the Month in October 1992, she seemed destined for a bright future. With her striking blonde beauty, infectious smile, and camera-ready charisma, she quickly became a fan favorite. Opportunities followed as she made television appearances and enjoyed the attention that came with being one of Playboy's rising stars. From the outside, Tiffany appeared to be living a dream that millions could only imagine. But beneath the glamorous image, her life was becoming increasingly complicated. As the years passed, Tiffany faced personal struggles that gradually pulled her away from the spotlight. Headlines that once celebrated her beauty began giving way to reports of legal troubles and difficult circumstances. The fame that had once opened doors no longer provided the happiness many assumed it would. By the 2000s, concerns about her well-being had grown among those who remembered her Playboy success. Friends and observers watched as the former model battled challenges far removed from the glamorous world she once inhabited. Her story became a stark contrast to the image that had made her famous, a reminder that public appearances often reveal only a small part of a person's life. Then, in November 2008, Tiffany Sloan passed away at just 35 years old. The news shocked many fans who remembered her as one of the most recognizable playmates of the early 1990s. While her career had once symbolized beauty, success, and opportunity, her later years painted a much more complex picture. Claudia Jennings, the rising Hollywood star whose future vanished overnight. By the early 1970s, Claudia Jennings was becoming one of the most recognizable faces associated with Playboy. After being named Playmate of the Year in 1970, her stunning beauty and natural screen presence quickly opened doors in Hollywood. Unlike many models who struggled to transition into acting, Claudia seemed poised to make the leap successfully. Film roles began arriving, fans adored her, and industry insiders believed she had the charisma to become much more than a magazine icon. As her popularity grew, Claudia became a familiar face in action films, television appearances, and entertainment magazines. She represented the glamorous spirit of 1970s Hollywood, confident, ambitious, and impossible to ignore. For a young woman who had already achieved what many only dreamed about, the future appeared brighter with every passing year. Success seemed not only possible but inevitable. Then, on October 3, 1979, everything changed in an instant. While traveling along a California highway, Claudia was involved in a devastating automobile accident. News of the crash spread quickly through Hollywood, shocking fans and colleagues alike. At just 29 years old, she had already built an impressive career, yet it felt as though her biggest opportunities were still waiting just around the corner. What makes Claudia's story so haunting is the sense of unfinished potential that surrounds it. She had beauty growing, fame, and a career gaining momentum at exactly the right moment. Many believed she was on the verge of reaching an entirely new level of success. Instead, her name became another heartbreaking chapter in Hollywood history, a reminder that sometimes the brightest stars disappear long before their story is meant to end. Paige Young, the Playboy beauty surrounded by questions. When Paige Young appeared as Playboy's Playmate of the Month in November 1968, she seemed to represent everything the era celebrated: beauty, confidence, and limitless possibility. With her striking looks and captivating presence, she quickly became one of the memorable faces of Playboy's golden age. Fans saw a glamorous young woman stepping into a world filled with opportunity, attention, and excitement. Few could have imagined how quickly that promising future would unravel. Behind the scenes, however, Paige's life was far more complicated than the public realized. As she attempted to navigate fame and the pressures that came with it, friends later described periods of emotional difficulty and personal uncertainty. Like many young women suddenly thrust into the spotlight, she faced challenges that rarely appeared in photographs or magazine interviews. The image admired by millions told only part of the story. Then in June 1974, shocking news emerged. Paige Young was found dead in Los Angeles at just 30 years old. The circumstances surrounding her death immediately attracted public attention, fueling speculation and raising difficult questions. For fans who remembered her vibrant Playboy image, the tragedy felt almost impossible to comprehend. How could someone who appeared to have so much ahead of her be gone so soon? The scarf. By the 1920s, Isadora Duncan had become one of the most celebrated dancers in the world. Known for her free-spirited performances, flowing robes, and dramatic silk scarves, she had built a reputation as a true artistic pioneer. Her scarves were more than just accessories. They were part of her identity, appearing in photographs, public appearances, and performances. Wherever Duncan went, the elegant fabric seemed to follow, becoming one of the most recognizable symbols of her career. On the evening of September 14, 1927, Duncan was preparing for a drive through the streets of Nice, France. A friend suggested she wear something warmer because the weather was cool, but she declined and instead draped a long hand-painted silk scarf over her shoulders. She climbed into the passenger seat of an open-top sports car, ready to enjoy the ride. As the vehicle pulled away, the loose end of the scarf fluttered behind her in the wind, creating a scene that seemed effortlessly stylish and carefree. Courts are supposed to be places of order, where truth unfolds and justice speaks. But what happens when rage moves faster than the law? When victims, killers, and even strangers turn a courtroom into a stage for violence? From a mother who fired 7 shots into her child's murderer to a mob of women who delivered their own brutal verdict. These are the moments when justice didn't just fail, it was taken stolen or silenced in an instant. And once the trigger was pulled, there was no going back. Antoinette Frank, the officer who brought violence into justice. The courtroom was supposed to be the place where Antoinette Frank would finally face judgment. A former police officer in New Orleans, she was no stranger to the law. In fact, she had once been part of it. But behind that badge was a story that would shock the entire country. Frank had been convicted for her role in a brutal triple murder during a robbery in 1995. The case alone was enough to horrify the public. A police officer someone sworn to protect had crossed into something unthinkable. By the time she stood trial, the courtroom was filled with tension, not just because of the crime, but because of who she had been. During the proceedings, the atmosphere was heavy and unpredictable. This was not just another defendant. This was someone trained in weapons, trained in control, now sitting on the other side of the system. Every movement, every reaction carried a different weight. The line between order and danger felt thinner than usual. In the end, justice was delivered through the legal system, but the case left behind something deeper. It forced people to confront a chilling reality. When someone who understands the system from the inside turns against it, the consequences can shake the very foundation of trust. In a series where violence interrupts justice, this case reminds us that sometimes the danger is not outside the system. Sometimes it comes from within. William Spengler. The ambush before justice could begin. The courthouse in Webster, New York, was supposed to be the place where William Spengler would finally face the consequences of his past actions. He had already spent years in prison for killing his grandmother decades earlier, and now he was once again under scrutiny. But instead of stepping into a courtroom to be judged, Spengler had something else in mind. On December 24th, 2012, what began as a routine emergency call quickly turned into something far more sinister. A house fire broke out in a quiet neighborhood, drawing firefighters and first responders to the scene. It looked like a normal rescue situation, the kind they handled every day. But hidden within that fire was a trap carefully planned and waiting to unfold. As responders arrived, gunfire suddenly erupted. The scene transformed instantly from rescue to survival, as those who came to help realized they had been lured into danger. Chaos spread across the area, and what should have been a moment of service became a deadly ambush that shocked the entire nation. In the end, Spengler did not stand trial for what he had done that day. His actions cut the legal process short before it could even begin. And that is what makes this case so chilling. In a series where justice is interrupted inside courtrooms, this moment stands just outside it, showing that sometimes the system doesn't even get the chance to speak before everything is already decided. Christopher Scarver, the man who delivered his own judgment. By the time Christopher Scarver crossed paths with Jeffrey Dahmer, the world already knew Dahmer as one of the most infamous killers in American history. He had been convicted, sentenced, and placed inside a maximum security prison. Legally, justice had already been delivered. But inside those walls, the story was far from over. Scarver was another inmate, quiet, observant, and deeply affected by the crimes he had heard about. According to later accounts, he was disturbed by Dahmer's behavior in prison, especially how casually he seemed to treat the horrors he had committed. For Scarver, this was not just another prisoner. This was someone whose actions had crossed every possible line. On November 28, 1994, during a routine work detail inside the prison, the situation shifted. With no warning to the outside world, Scarver confronted Dahmer away from guards and other inmates. What happened next unfolded quickly, turning a controlled correctional environment into the setting for an act that would shock the public all over again. The aftermath raised difficult questions that echoed beyond the prison walls. Dahmer had already been sentenced by the legal system, yet his life ended not by the law, but by another inmate. Scarver later claimed he acted out of moral conviction, but the debate remains. Was this justice, revenge, or something in between? In a series defined by moments where the system loses control, this case proves that even after the verdict is delivered, the story is not always over. Raffaele Sollecito. The verdict that shattered the silence. The courtroom in Perugia, Italy, had been under intense global attention for years. The case surrounding the murder of British student Meredith Kercher had already become one of the most controversial trials in modern history. At the center of it stood Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito, two young defendants whose lives had been dissected in front of the world. Every hearing, every statement, every piece of evidence had been watched, debated, and questioned. By the time the appeals process reached its critical stage, tension inside the courtroom was almost unbearable. This was not just another legal proceeding. It was a moment that could redefine everything people thought they knew about the case. Journalists filled every available space, cameras waited outside, and inside silence stretched as the court prepared to deliver its decision. When the verdict finally came, it did not bring the clarity many expected. Instead, it triggered an emotional collapse that echoed through the room. Reactions erupted instantly. The controlled atmosphere gave way to raw human emotion, with cries, disbelief, and chaos replacing the formal structure of the court. What was meant to be the final word of justice instead reopened questions that had never truly been answered. The aftermath only deepened the mystery. Appeals continued, decisions were overturned, and the case became a symbol of how fragile certainty can be inside a courtroom. In the end, this was not a story of sudden violence like the others, but it carried the same unsettling truth. Even in the most controlled legal setting, the line between order and chaos can disappear in a single moment, leaving behind more questions than answers. Gary Plauché, the father who couldn't wait for justice. The airport in Baton Rouge looked like any other that day, busy routine and filled with people moving through their own lives. But on March 16, 1984, it became the stage for a moment that would be replayed for decades. Police were escorting Jeffrey Doucet through the terminal, bringing him back to face charges tied to the kidnapping and abuse of an 11-year-old boy, Jody Plauché. Cameras were rolling, expecting nothing more than a standard transfer. What they captured instead would shock an entire nation. Doucet was not a stranger pulled from the shadows. He had once been close enough to the family to earn trust, making the accusations even more devastating. By the time Jody was found and Doucet was returned to Louisiana, the legal system was ready to take over. But for Jody's father, Gary Plauché, the process of waiting for justice was something he could no longer endure. As Doucet was led through the airport, Gary stood nearby, blending into the background. Wearing a cap and holding a phone to his ear, he appeared calm, almost invisible. Then, in a single, irreversible moment, he lowered the receiver, turned, and fired at close range. The scene unfolded instantly, officers rushing in as Doucet collapsed, and the room filled with shock. One question echoed through the chaos, a question that would stay with the footage forever. The aftermath was as complex as the moment itself. Gary was arrested and charged, but the legal outcome surprised many. He received a suspended sentence, probation, and community service, serving no prison time. To some, he became a symbol of a father's love pushed beyond its limits. To others, he represented a line that should never be crossed. What remains undeniable is this: the law was ready to speak, but a father's grief spoke first. Jack Ruby, the shot that silenced a nation. America was still reeling from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy when another moment of shock unfolded in front of the entire world. On November 24, 1963, inside the basement of the Dallas Police Headquarters, cameras were broadcasting live as officers prepared to transfer Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of killing the president. It was supposed to be a routine procedure, one step closer to a trial that the entire country was waiting for. But in a matter of seconds, everything changed. From within the crowd of reporters and officers, a man stepped forward without warning. His name was Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with no official role in the case. Before anyone could react, he fired a single shot at Oswald at close range. The moment was captured live, turning what should have been a controlled transfer into a scene that stunned millions watching across the nation. Oswald, the key figure in one of the most important investigations in American history, was suddenly gone before he could ever stand trial. The impact of that moment went far beyond the act itself. Oswald had been the man everyone wanted to hear from, the one who might have answered the questions surrounding the president's death. With his sudden collapse and death shortly after, those answers seemed to vanish with him. The public was left not only grieving, but questioning how something so critical could unfold so easily in front of cameras and law enforcement. Ruby did not escape the consequences, but even his fate carried a sense of unfinished business. He was convicted, then later granted a new trial, but never lived to see it through. His death years later closed the legal chapter, but not the mystery. What remained was a moment frozen in time where justice, truth, and history collided in a single instant that the world has never fully stopped questioning. Michael Marin, the final act in the courtroom. Michael Marin once lived a life many people could only imagine. A former Wall Street trader and successful financier, he was known for wealth, adventure, and ambition. But behind that image, things had begun to unravel. By 2009, financial pressure was closing in, and his million-dollar home in Arizona had become more of a burden than a symbol of success. When attempts to sell it failed, Marin made a decision that would set everything else in motion. The house went up in flames under suspicious circumstances, and investigators quickly turned their attention to him. What followed was a highly publicized trial that exposed not just the fire, but the collapse of a once prominent life. As the case unfolded, it became clear that the evidence was mounting, and the outcome was not moving in his favor. For Marin, the courtroom was no longer just a place to defend himself. It was where everything he had built was slipping away. On June 28, 2012, the trial reached its final moment. The verdict was delivered, and Marin was found guilty. But instead of waiting for sentencing, he made a quiet, almost unnoticed move. In front of the court, with cameras recording, he placed something in his mouth. Within moments, his condition changed, and confusion spread across the room as people realized something was wrong. Despite efforts to save him, Marin did not survive. Investigators later confirmed that he had taken a toxic substance, something he had obtained long before the verdict was ever read. It was a final decision made in silence, but one that echoed far beyond that courtroom. His story remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the most shocking endings are not loud or chaotic, but deliberate, controlled, and impossible to reverse. Brian Nichols, the day the courthouse became a battlefield. The Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta was supposed to be a place of control, where every movement was monitored and every outcome followed the law. But on March 11, 2005, that sense of order collapsed in a way no one inside the building could have imagined. Brian Nichols, already facing serious charges, including assault and kidnapping, was being prepared for trial. There had been concerns about his behavior before, whispers that he might try something desperate, but nothing had prepared anyone for what came next. The situation began quietly, almost unnoticed. Nichols managed to overpower a deputy and gain access to a weapon inside the courthouse. In a matter of moments, the balance of power shifted. What had been a secure environment suddenly became unpredictable. As he moved through the building, fear spread rapidly. Court staff, officers, and civilians were forced into a situation that escalated faster than anyone could react. As chaos unfolded, multiple lives were lost, and the courthouse turned into the center of a massive emergency response. Nichols didn't stop there. He forced his way out, taking advantage of the confusion to escape into the city. What followed was one of the most intense manhunts in recent memory, as law enforcement searched for a man who had already shown how far he was willing to go. Hours later, the situation finally came to an end when Nichols was located and taken into custody after holding a woman hostage. The courtroom drama that was supposed to decide his fate had transformed into something far more chilling. In the end, he would face justice, but the events of that day left a lasting mark, proving that even the most secure places can unravel in an instant when desperation takes control. Nathaniel Richmond, the ambush outside the courthouse. It was supposed to be just another morning outside the Jefferson County Courthouse in Steubenville, Ohio. The kind of routine day where a judge walks into work expecting to deal with legal arguments, not danger. But on August 21st, 2017, that routine was shattered before it could even begin. Waiting nearby inside a parked car was a man whose story had already crossed paths with the justice system too many times. Nathaniel Richmond was no stranger to the courtroom. He was involved in a wrongful death lawsuit connected to a house fire that had taken his mother's life. On top of that, his son had been convicted in a highly publicized case years earlier. To many, it seemed like a buildup of frustration, a growing resentment toward a system he no longer trusted. That morning, as Judge Joseph Bruzzese approached the courthouse, Richmond made his move. Without warning, he stepped out and opened fire. The judge was struck and collapsed, turning a quiet sidewalk into a scene of chaos. But what happened next was something no one expected. Instead of staying down, Judge Bruzzese fought back. In a moment that felt almost unreal, he returned fire as Richmond attempted to escape toward the waiting car. The situation escalated within seconds as another officer joined in. Richmond's plan unraveled just as quickly as it began. By the time it was over, the attacker was down, and the judge was rushed to the hospital. Against all odds, he survived. The incident left the community shaken and raised a chilling question. When anger and desperation collide with the justice system, how thin is the line between order and chaos? Ciale Angelou, the split-second decision. The courtroom in Salt Lake City was supposed to be controlled, predictable, and secure. Ciale Angelou, a suspected member of a violent gang, stood trial as part of a major federal case involving robbery, assault, and organized crime. As the final defendant, his trial carried weight. The testimony presented that day could tie everything together. Despite the seriousness of the charges, officials made a critical choice. Angelou was allowed to sit unrestrained, a decision that assumed the courtroom itself would be enough to keep order. As the proceedings moved forward, a key witness took the stand, someone with direct knowledge of the gang's inner workings. Every word added pressure, every detail tightening the situation around Angelou. The room remained quiet, but the tension was unmistakable. Then, without warning, that tension broke. Angelou suddenly stood up. In his hand was a pen, something ordinary that instantly became a threat in the charged atmosphere. He rushed toward the witness stand, closing the distance in seconds. What had been a structured legal process collapsed into chaos as people reacted at once. Officers responded immediately, stopping the situation before it could escalate further. The courtroom fell silent again, but it was no longer the same. Shock replaced order, and the reality of what had just happened settled in. A single impulsive decision had changed everything in an instant. In the aftermath, questions lingered. Why was he unrestrained? Could it have been prevented? Was the response unavoidable? Opinions differed, but one truth remained clear. Even in a place built on rules and control, it only takes 1 second for everything to spiral beyond it. David Paradiso, the moment the courtroom broke. The case against David Paradiso was already unsettling before the trial even began. He was accused of killing his girlfriend, Eileen Pelt, after what started as an argument, but quickly turned violent. Later, Paradiso claimed he acted out of fear, insisting he believed she was going to harm him first. But the details painted a darker picture. After the attack, he forced his own mother to drive him away and helped dispose of the body, dragging her into a crime that shocked the community. As the trial moved forward, concerns about Paradiso's mental state began to surface. His defense pointed to drug use and paranoia, while his mother warned authorities that he was unstable and capable of unpredictable behavior. Despite those warnings, the proceedings continued, and Paradiso eventually took the stand to tell his version of events. The courtroom remained tense but controlled. No one expected what would come next. On March 4, 2009, during a brief break in the proceedings, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. As people began to move around and attention loosened, Paradiso suddenly made his move. His target was the judge presiding over the case. What had been a structured and orderly environment collapsed into confusion within seconds. Officers reacted immediately, bringing the situation under control before it could escalate further. The suddenness of the moment left everyone stunned. Just moments earlier, it had been a routine day in court. Then, without warning, everything changed. The judge survived, but the incident left a lasting impression. It became a chilling reminder that even inside a courtroom, where every movement is monitored and every rule is enforced, control can vanish in a single heartbeat. Aku Yadav, the man the system couldn't stop. For years, the name Aku Yadav carried fear through the streets of Nagpur, India. He was not just a criminal, he was a shadow that lived inside people's homes. Families whispered about him, women avoided being alone, and entire neighborhoods felt trapped under his control. He was accused of robbery, extortion, kidnapping, and the repeated abuse of women and even young girls, yet somehow he always found his way back onto the streets. People did go to the police. Complaints were filed again and again. In fact, Yadav was arrested multiple times, but nothing ever seemed to stick. Cases disappeared, witnesses stayed silent, and rumors spread that he had protection from those who were supposed to stop him. Over time, fear turned into something heavier. It turned into anger. On August 13, 2004, that anger finally broke. Inside a courtroom in Nagpur, Yadav appeared for what was expected to be another routine hearing. But the room was not ordinary that day. Dozens, then hundreds of women filled the space, many of them victims who had carried their pain in silence for years. As the proceedings began, tension thickened, and within moments the situation spiraled out of control. When it was over, Yadav was no longer standing. The courtroom, once a place for legal judgment, had become the stage for something else entirely. Authorities were left stunned, and the country was forced to confront a difficult question. What happens when a system fails so completely that people no longer believe justice will ever come? Marianne Bachmeier, the mother who pulled the trigger. The courtroom in Lübeck, West Germany, was meant to be a place where the truth would unfold and justice would take its course. Instead, it became the setting for one of the most shocking acts ever witnessed in a trial. Marianne Bachmeier sat among the public, a grieving mother carrying a pain that no verdict could ever erase. Her 7-year-old daughter Anna had been taken by Klaus Grabowski, a man who was not a stranger, but a neighbor with a dark past that should have kept him far from any child. As the trial progressed, the details grew harder to bear. Grabowski admitted to the killing, but offered explanations that many found disturbing and unbelievable. His defense attempted to frame his actions as the result of uncontrollable impulses, turning the courtroom into a place where responsibility seemed blurred. For Marianne, every word felt like another wound, as if her daughter's story was being twisted into something unrecognizable. On the third day of the trial, the tension reached a breaking point. Marianne entered the courtroom carrying a small pistol hidden in her purse. At the right moment, she stood, took aim, and fired 7 shots at Grabowski. Each shot echoed through the room, leaving everyone frozen in disbelief. The man at the center of the case collapsed before the legal process could reach its conclusion. When it was over, Marianne did not attempt to escape or deny what she had done. She later expressed that her actions were driven by a deep sense of loss and a belief that justice had already failed her daughter. The court would ultimately sentence her for the act, but public opinion remained divided. To some, she had crossed a line that should never be crossed. To others, she became a symbol of a mother who could not stand by while the system struggled to deliver the justice she believed her child deserved.
Gjorde sin första operation 2010 men är långt ifrån klar än. Hennes förebild är den tecknade seriefiguren Holly Wood.
They had the fame, the fortune, the faces the world couldn't stop admiring. But in Hollywood, even perfection has an expiration date. So what happens when celebrities refuse to age and let scalpels, fillers, and impossible beauty standards take the wheel? From frozen smiles to faces no one could recognize, these shocking transformations prove that sometimes the real horror movie starts after the surgery. Buckle up, because vanity doesn't always come with a happy ending. April Michelle Brown, the beauty fix that cost more than anyone could imagine. April. Michelle Brown wasn't chasing Hollywood fame or social media perfection. She simply wanted a cosmetic enhancement that she believed would boost her confidence. Like countless others searching for a bargain, she trusted an underground injector who promised dramatic results without the dramatic price tag. Unfortunately, the only thing injected faster than confidence was danger. It turned out that discount beauty can come with a receipt no one wants to pay. Instead of a successful transformation, industrial-grade silicone entered her body, triggering a devastating infection that spread with terrifying speed. What began as a cosmetic procedure quickly became a desperate fight for survival. April endured an astonishing 27 surgeries as doctors worked to remove damaged tissue and stop the infection from taking even more. In the end, the damage was so severe that she lost both her hands and feet. Suddenly, beauty wasn't about mirrors anymore. It was about making it through another day. It's a heartbreaking reminder that when someone offers luxury results at basement prices, the basement might be the only part that's genuine. Yet April refused to let tragedy become the final chapter of her story. Learning to live with prosthetic limbs, she rebuilt her life with remarkable determination and transformed unimaginable loss into a message that has reached thousands of people. Today, her experience stands as one of the strongest warnings against unregulated cosmetic procedures and unqualified practitioners. Lin May, a beauty secret or a beauty nightmare. Have you ever trusted someone who promised a miracle for almost nothing? Imagine walking in hoping to leave looking years younger, only to discover that the biggest transformation wasn't your confidence. It was the worst decision of your life. That's exactly the kind of shocking twist that turned Mexican entertainer Lin May from a glamorous stage icon into one of the most talked about cautionary tales in cosmetic history. Sometimes if a beauty deal sounds too good to be true, it's probably hiding more surprises than a reality TV finale. Lin May was already famous for her dazzling performances and unforgettable charisma when she decided to refresh her appearance. According to her account, An unqualified practitioner injected her face with baby oil instead of a legitimate cosmetic filler. What was supposed to be a subtle enhancement became a devastating disaster. Her face gradually swelled and changed dramatically, leading to years of corrective procedures that could never fully restore her original features. It was the kind of makeover no one would ever ask